All right, everybody. So we're jumping into the security news section, which, like I mentioned before, is probably just going to be a weekly thing now because security is always fun. So you have quite a few interesting topics today. The most interesting to me, even though it's kind of a little one, is actually the one that's going to come at the end of this section here. But I wanted to start off with something that's been a controversial topic for a long time: facial recognition. So there's been a lot of talk about facial recognition, whether or not it's really morally acceptable, whether or not it's constitutionally acceptable, how accurate it is, how potentially, racist and or sexist it is, and all that kind of stuff. And the good news here is rather than talking about and arguing about that quite as much is just the fact that IBM has said that they will not do any more facial recognition. They have canceled all like forms of development that they've done on it, all wholesale of their facial recognition software, and do not condone the use of facial recognition at all. They're really heavily against it. And around this same time, Microsoft and Amazon have also both came out and said that they're not really okay with it. I take IBM and Microsoft a lot more seriously here because Amazon is also selling our Ring data to the police.
Yeah, so from my understanding, so like we know for sure IBM fully is not working on it at all. It sounds
Hmm.
like Amazon is still working on it. They're just not selling it for a year to
Yeah.
police. Um
I think they said they're pausing development on it for like a year as well. I'm trying to find out here. Or
oh,
not a
okay. I
year,
had only
six
heard that they
months.
suspended selling on it.
That could be. That could be.
Um
Let's see. Yeah, I don't know. It's the big one for me was IBM. So that was actually what I based the topic here on. Is
and Microsoft is just banning selling it to police.
yes, right. And that was I think that was one of the things Amazon had mentioned too. I am fully against the idea of development on it for the time being. We need a lot more policy work done before we can really start to work on anything like this. We've seen how bad facial recognition and like body movement recognition is in China and what they're using it for. And I don't want any government really to have access to that right now. Not one that I do or don't trust. And so IBM just saying no to it is something I appreciate. And IBM is still a big company. Every time they come up in our podcast, I mention that they're still a huge company. They're
Yeah, they
still
make
around.
clocks for schools.
Yes, they make a lot of clocks. So
That's my
no,
favorite thing to see the IBM logo on is clocks.
yeah, it's
I
pretty
want
funny.
an IBM clock actually. Can I buy one?
I don't know. Look it up. Find out. I want one too then. But yeah, I don't know. You know, people kind of forget IBM's in the back end of everything playing right now. So
Yeah.
it's interesting to hear them saying this because they've been a big developer of facial recognition software. And this obviously is just the major companies. This is not these small companies that are still around, like Clearview AI, that's doing facial recognition, which is not great.
Yeah.
So I don't like that.
Um, you can buy a reproduction of the IBM clock, and it's only $250.
From where?
Schoolhouse.com.
What?
Yeah.
I gotta find out about this.
I'll send you
Oh
the link.
my. Okay, yeah, please do send me that link. I wanna look at that.
Um, but yeah, overall, I think that this is good. We'll see what happens though, because the other thing too is like Amazon can be like, "Yo, we're not gonna sell to police, but we can sell to people that'll sell to police."
This is true, and Amazon's one of the, like, I don't trust them about anything. Right? They're a sketchy company. I don't trust
Mhm.
what they say, and so coming out here and claiming something that's fine. It's equal to Facebook claiming that they have good security. So to
Yeah.
me, but I guess that's a good transition into Facebook paying a third-party organization for a zero-day vulnerability to be manufactured. Now,
Yeah.
to be clear, I want to say first kudos to both Facebook and the FBI for using it to catch somebody so horrible. And I will not say a name, and I will not talk about what they did because it is frankly too disgusting to talk about, even if I weren't trying to monetize this. I will just say a child predator that they caught back in 2017. Really horrible person. And, it does emphasize that balance of security versus privacy being a significant issue
Mhm.
because this person was particularly hard to catch, and without doing this may have taken longer or never been possible, It was really bad.
Yeah, and this is one of those things where, like, we see most of the laws attacking privacy and encryption
Yeah.
are based on, um, or at least their argument is going after child predators.
Yeah. Hmm.
But this is a very interesting thing where it's not like there was like a back hole that was intentionally left there for this. It was literally they just found a way to get in for this specific situation, and that
Yes,
0
it was not
days.
something that was like a pre-programmed like back door like we've talked
Yeah.
about the FBI wanting and stuff like that. This was something that Facebook paid their own money, six figures, albeit not a lot for them, but six figures to have this developed by a third-party cybersecurity firm, in order to trick this person into opening up a video that finally allowed them to find out what their real IP address was, so that they could get to them and take them down. And I'm really glad they did. Obviously, like this was, I want to emphasize that as much as possible. Good work in catching the person, but it just kind of disgusts me at the same time seeing a company paying for a 0 day vulnerability basically to be developed. It's not like they paid the makers of the software to develop it, so it kind of relied on a Tor reliant operating system vulnerability that was put in place. And it was not like the developers of that or anybody that had anything to do with Tor directly. As far as we know, of course, they just call it a cybersecurity
Mhm.
firm. But as far as we know, it was not the developers that put in the backdoor. It was actually a vulnerability that was made, right? Um, that was like researched and made by a third party organization. But it's still crazy to think that, this was disclosed, right? But what if this is going on and it's not disclosed, where they're potentially using it not to catch somebody so horrible? They're using it for tracking or something.
Yeah, and this was not recent, right?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, so
2017 was when they caught the person.
yeah, so like then for all we know, like they could have done this, if they tell us about this 3 years later,
Yeah. So like,
they
what are
could
they doing right now?
have done this multiple times. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So it's weird. I don't know. It's just a weird situation, and privacy is a big deal to me, and should be to most people. And security is as well. And it bothers me seeing this kind of stuff happening. But this is also why I don't trust Facebook.
Yeah.
But
Oh, yeah.
again, I'm really glad they caught this person. These
Yeah.
kinds of people need to be dealt with, I'll say. Um, yeah. So I don't know. I thought it was an interesting topic, but I don't have too much to add other than I don't like the idea of a manufactured vulnerability.
Yeah.
Yeah. So unfortunate. But now we can jump into Zoom, who's never been in the security news before, so it's really surprising hearing anything about them. Uh, so Zoom has had some more client issues. Now, first and foremost, the good news is these are patched. They've already been patched, so as long as you are updated, you're good to go. So I will say with the growth Zoom had, it's not surprising. We've said this before. It's not surprising to find vulnerabilities in software that grows so rapidly, where its user base was smaller before. And the good thing is Zoom always seems to be very prompt about fixing them as quick as they can when they're notified, making sure to warn people, telling people the truth, and not trying to cover it up or hide any of this stuff. And oftentimes it's
Yeah,
fixed.
and we'll talk about it with the next story too, but they're like weirdly transparent even when they do things that are like not good.
Yeah, like things that you'd be like, okay, that's either not okay, or we'd prefer you didn't like. They're transparent, and that's important. Is I feel like, okay, we know a lot of other companies are doing some of the stuff that we're going to talk about later, similar type of things, but we don't really know from them firsthand, but we know from Zoom firsthand on these things. And again, every time I like to bring up this, Zoom does have a HIPAA compliant version that has to not fall under some of this stuff that's talked about. So,
Yeah.
and the Zoom client is really good about prompting you to update when you open it, and so most people should be updated with this without a problem at all. So it's good. So Cisco Talos is one of the first groups to find, or not one of the first groups, but is the group to find both of these vulnerabilities. And what's interesting is Cisco is actually a big pusher of course, their own video conferencing product, WebEx. So there's probably a little bit of a back end there of Cisco being like, we don't mind spending money to try and find issues with a competitor,
Yeah.
which I don't know. I have mixed feelings about that in some ways, but it makes things more secure. So whatever. I have mixed feelings about Cisco in general. So I'm not going to go into mega detail, partially for sake of time here, but also because I am not a full-fledged expert on these particular vulnerabilities. But there was a path traversal issue that had to do with the integrated GIF functions, and so that was something that they dealt with, where they could send a special message to a user, and it would. Why are you shaking your head?
You know why.
Because I said GIF the way it's supposed to
Yeah.
be pronounced.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the way it's supposed to be pronounced, guys. So just saying. Otherwise, we'd say JPEG, JPG. So just saying. Um, so anyway, yeah, so it was a path traversal issue. It's kind of similar to a previous path traversal issue that they had in the past, and it's been since patched, so you're pretty much good to go now. And then there was also a issue with the real-time chat where somebody could send a specially crafted message that would it had to be interacted with generally, but it would allow them to compromise the system and do remote code execution, which of course is horrid. So two really bad issues, but luckily they've been fixed. And like I said, Zoom is pretty good about prompting for updates, so the majority of people should be good. You should definitely just update Zoom when it asks for an update. Like, that's just something that you should absolutely do. So, but that's pretty much it. There's not too much more to go into with their security issues in specific, but we have another little point here about Zoom working with China. So this was something that you actually researched more than me, but yeah, I'll let you go
Yeah,
ahead.
so essentially what happened, Zoom had started getting a lot of criticism because it came out that they had suspended 3 accounts. And essentially what happened was China had reported to Zoom that there were 4 calls that were going to be taking place to commemorate the Tiananmen Square massacre. And
Mm.
Zoom looked into it and determined that 3 of the 4 calls had, I mean, were for sure or were very likely to have people from China participating,
Mm-hmm.
not hosting, but participating.
Yeah.
So they banned the people, or suspended, temporarily banned the people hosting the calls of those 3 that were likely to
Yeah.
have people from mainland China, um, because China didn't want them to have the calls.
It's really weird that they
Yeah.
would,
So they
because they were not
literally,
hosted by Chinese at all, like anybody from China, right? All 4 of them, as far as we know, were hosted elsewhere, correct?
correct. So they suspended 4 users who were not in mainland China for doing calls that China didn't like involving Chinese citizens.
Weird. That's just weird that they can suspend the account. But I mean,
I mean, Zoom can suspend whoever they want.
no, they can. I'm just saying it's weird that that's the choice instead of just canceling the meeting. But I guess the concern would be they just send out another meeting.
Well, yeah, and that's where
Yeah.
the next thing comes in, is that Zoom is working on a feature to region block people so that if this happens again, instead of suspending the host, they can block people from China from being able to join the call.
Hmm.
But since
So
they
they're
didn't
finding
have that
this.
in place, what their solution was to temporarily ban non-Chinese participants, or as well.
Yeah, which is sketchy, to
Like,
say the
China
least.
shouldn't have that, essentially
Authority.
that authority over a
Yeah.
non-Chinese company, let alone any company operating
Or any
anything outside of
citizen
China.
outside of China. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. That's something that bugs me, but it looks like they're trying to find a fix so that they like it almost appears as if they were like, okay, this is wrong, but we're doing this to prevent escalation and potentially being banned from China, which
Yeah.
obviously is a big portion of profit. And then after that, took
But
action of how can we
yeah, in
solve this
my
for the
opinion,
future.
they should have just told China, like, look, we can't, we will build the blocking thing as fast as possible, but we can't do anything other than that. They shouldn't have
Yeah.
fucking suspended people
Agreed. Agreed.
outside of the country.
Yeah, yeah, there should have been something there where it was like, okay, we can do this, but not with this
Yeah.
event. If you gave us more time, we could have, that kind
Yeah,
of thing.
because like
And
they said, and this is like a quote from a Zoom employee: going forward, Zoom will not allow requests from the Chinese government to impact anyone outside of mainland China.
so
They
that's also
shouldn't
good.
have from the first place.
Agreed, agreed. But it's almost like, okay, a mistake was made in some ways. Like somebody made some kind of decision here, and it was objectively speaking the wrong decision, but they realized it was the wrong decision later and said, okay, we're going to build out something that's going to help us fix this, and also will not do this going forward. And so it kind of goes back to the security thing of, with Zoom so far, we've seen a lot of, here's a problem, but they're transparent and they fix it.
Yeah, I mean, so the thing here though is it doesn't really, to me, seem like it was like an employee just like happened to make a bad decision, because
Yeah,
this is all like, this is not like this is happening, months later that they're like, oh no, we shouldn't have done that, we're fixing the thing. It really
right.
seems like what happened was they got the request, they were like, and we're just going to comply in the way that's easiest now, and then build the solution as soon as we can.
Yeah, yeah. And then
Um,
how much of this was influenced by negativity from the public, right?
yeah.
Too. Like did they decide, hey, we should build this out so we can fix this in the future at the time of the event or at the time of public outcry? Right?
Yeah.
But at least they're listening to the public if that's the case, then too. They're listening to what people are saying is not acceptable. So
Mhm.
I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it because I think Zoom is genuinely a pretty great platform. There are open source alternatives that I would feel more private with unless you're paying for something like the HIPAA compliant version, the
Mhm.
healthcare version. But at the same time, Zoom is genuinely a good platform. It has a lot of good features. It's extraordinarily user friendly. It never has any problems problems in terms of like stability, like crashes and stuff. It seems to be very, very stable. Um, I don't have to train people to use it too much. It's pretty intuitive. So I don't know. And they have features that I wouldn't expect a video conferencing thing to have as well.
Mhm.
So very mixed feelings from me personally about it. Because the transparency is something that I do want to give them credit for, because we don't see that from most companies.
Yeah, I'm surprised they pretty much just straight up were like, yeah, we let the Chinese government manipulate us into suspending users outside of China.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, I feel like every company, that is a super important aspect of the company, is just be completely transparent. Because even if you're doing bad things, you're making horrible mistakes, if everybody knows, then they either have the option to not use you, or they have the option to complain and you have to fix it, or they won't use you, right? So being transparent about it is like the start of so many things. So like I got to give them credit there, credit where credit is due, for
Yeah.
versus something like Amazon or Ring or something like that, where they're not really clear with you about what's going on. And if they are clear with you about what's going on, because they legally have to be in some instances, it is, all right, how can we take, yes, we let China manipulate us, and turn it into 40 pages of documentation so that nobody reads it.
Yeah.
So I guess it's still not good, but So the next one is going to be my favorite security piece of the week so far. And this one is, and just to be clear, actually, before I start this, I do want to say there's obviously, we could make an entire 2-hour podcast about security every week. We go over what I feel like are the interesting or larger topics that are more important. So I just want to be clear here. There's going to be some people commenting saying, what about this? But this is the last one for this week. And this one was really interesting to me. So something that Mozilla has been working on, and other companies as well, like Google, but it's been getting worked on, of being able to do DNS over HTTPS, which is also DOH. Now, for those that don't understand what that means, DNS is domain name services. So when you go to a website, it's actually connecting to a DNS server that says google.com is this IP address, and that's the address your computer connects to. And then doing DNS over HTTPS is allowing it to be encrypted, because currently the way DNS works is it's non-encrypted, really super, super simple, lightweight packets of information that are sent to your DNS server for a query over UDP, in fact, so they can also fail and suffer other issues like that, so that the DNS servers don't have too much of a load. So those DNS servers can just reply with a really basic packet back, so they can be getting, potentially, thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, of DNS queries a minute. And I mean, that kind of level of DNS query can happen on like a home user's network. And so then you have like Google's DNS servers getting hundreds of millions of requests every minute. And so they're able to handle that because they're functioning like a web server. They're very transactional, as it said. So They are not designed for persistent long-term connectivity, but hey, I need this data, here you go, then hangs up that connection. Hey, I need this data, here you go, hangs up that connection. And DNS functions the same way. And so Mozilla's been trying to do DNS over HTTPS to encrypt it, because right now you can very easily be tracked of what sites and stuff you're visiting because of your DNS queries. And there are ways to kind of help yourself privately around that, but it's still pretty rough. And they were wanting to fix this, so it totally makes sense. It's a very key security point that needs to be fixed at some point. But the way Mozilla is doing it is essentially functioning like a VPN, like a virtual private network, sort of. So they're creating a persistent connection to the DNS servers, the encrypted, and these DNS servers have to be built for DOH specifically. They're not just any DNS server works with this, but they create a consistent, constant connection to that DNS server that is encrypted, and then they send their DNS queries over that encrypted tunnel, basically. And so that's an oversimplified version, but what happens is that means these web servers, or these not exactly web servers, but these DOH servers are having to handle tons of consistent connectivity instead of lots of little connections, and so they're not able to hang up those connections, which is something that A, web servers aren't really built for, but B, is also just more intensive in general. And so that creates a bit of an issue, and they ended up crashing some DNS servers because of this, DOH providers, because they rolled it out and to a lot of users, and these DNS servers weren't able to handle having these tons of persistent connections to send the DNS queries over. And so they actually had to release another update that disabled DOH, so that that didn't happen anymore. One in specific was Next DNS was down because of them, and they're back up now. Everything's good. But yeah, that was interesting to me. It was the most interesting topic, I think, to me, just because it's this bit of security, but it's a rough thing for us to have to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have to balance security versus convenience, and we're trying to make it convenient. And some people might be like, well, why don't they just open up that connection every time to make that DNS query? But your computer is making so many DNS queries that is going to slow down your page loading times, potentially even use more battery life and stuff like that, but especially slow down page loading times, because in some instances you go to a website and there's over 100 DNS queries from one website for all the various bits of information that they're trying to pull in there, for tracking, for ads, for videos, for embedding images, all kinds of stuff. And so you open up an article from some news site, and all of a sudden now you have to have all these extra encrypted connections opened up for it. It's not really viable, but I feel like there's got to be another way for them to do this instead of basically making a VPN.
Yeah.
But I thought it was interesting. But that's pretty much it for security actually this week, guys. We're getting pretty long on the podcast here, so like I said, that's just some of the bigger topics for the week of security.